What's up, mobile devs? Today we are going to build together this amazing dismiss animation. And in order to do it, we are going to use the PanGestureHandler from React Native Gesture Handler, and we are going to use, of course, Reanimated. So the purpose is clear. We just want to remove a specific item from the to-dos. We will build this example from scratch as always, but feel free to check out the GitHub repository. I will put a link in the video description. So there are a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and let's get finally our hands dirty and let's start to code. Here I have created a React Native project with the Expo CLI. In this tutorial I've already installed the React Native Reanimated package. We need version 2.2.0. And I've already installed the React Native Gesture Handler package in order to handle the translate text value that will help us in order to dismiss actually the list item cell. So I've also defined some constants. Here we can see that I've defined the titles. Basically here we have an array with the title of each list item. And I've defined the task interface and the task array. So basically, the task interface is just an interface with the title and an index. And the task array is derived from the title array. So here you can see how actually the task array looks. So we have the task with the index and with the title, the same title from the titles array. So here we will use the index later in order to identify each task. So I think we can already start. Here I've the latest constant is just a background color. It is quite similar to the white color, and we will use it in our main view. So we can already start to refactor a little bit the container style, and we can fix the title right here. So let's call it tasks, and let's define the styles.title style. So here we'll just use font size equal to 50 or maybe 60. Let's add margin vertical equal to 20. And let's add a padding left equal to, let's say, 5%. So we need actually to add also to replace the view, the main view, with the safe area view. So let's import the safe area from React Native, and here we can see that the layout will not consider anymore the safe area. So we can start to display our tasks. So in order to do that, let's store our tasks inside the state. So let's use the useState hook, and let's use the tasks and set tasks. So right now we just need the tasks, but later with the onDismiss functionality we will use the set task function. So here we can let's define a scroll view. So I'm importing the scroll view from React Native right now, and let's specify the tasks. So here, for now, let's just return a view, and let's specify a key with task.index. So we will not use this index right here. We will just use the task.index that we have on our task interface. So of course, we are not seeing nothing. Let's add a style here. Let's actually use flex1, and let's use a background color of red. So we can see that the scroll view is set up correctly. And here we will have our list item component. So since we will handle a lot of logic inside this component right here, it is a better option to create a components folder and to create a list item component inside that folder. So let's define the list item.tsx, and I'm using the snippet. So we need to define the list item props interface, here we will handle the task object. The task object will have a task interface, and we need to define the list item component as a functional component with these props right here. So here we can handle the task itself. So we can actually replace this view with the list item, and we need to assign here the task property. So we can finally start to work with the style of our list item component. So let's define the task itself. So the style, let's say for now, width equal to 90%. Let's define an height equal to 70, and let's use a different background color just to see something. So here we can see all the list items. Right now we cannot see that we can see everything as a unique item, but with the margin vertical we should be able to see our 5 list items. So in order to center this kind of tasks, let's wrap all the task view inside another view that we will call task container. So let's define our styles.taskContainer. So our task container will have a width of 100, and we need to use a line item equal to center. So here we can already start to handle the title, the task title. We need to center it with the justify content. We can add the padding left option. And I think, of course, we need to add the styles.task title. So let's define it. I will use a font size of 16. Okay, it looks great. And let's actually remove this ugly background color of red. Let's use a background color white. And let's add some shadows. So let's define a shadow opacity of 1. Shadow offset with width equal to 0 and height equal to 20. Let's add radius, shadow radius of 10, and let's reduce a little bit this opacity. So I think that with the 0.08 the shadow opacity looks nice. So this kind of styles I think works just for iOS. So this is the style of the shadow for iOS. For Android, shadow for Android, we just need the elevation property, and let's set it to value 5. So let's finally add also a border radius of 10. And I think that the cell looks great. So at this point we need to handle the PanGesture, and in order to handle it we need to use the PanGestureHandler from React Native GestureHandler. So let's import it, and let's wrap this view right here with the PanGestureHandler. So when we deal with the PanGestureHandler, we always need to wrap an animated view. So let's wrap an animated view. Here we need to import animated from React Native Reanimated and not from React Native, otherwise it will not work. And let's add this animated view right here. So in order to enable the PanGesture, we need to provide to the PanGestureHandler the onGesture event callback. So we can easily do that. We can define the PanGesture, and we can use the useAnimatedGestureHandler hook from React Native Reanimated. So here, this hook will help us to handle every type of gesture. We can handle the pinch gesture, the pan gesture, or the tap gesture. So I've already made a lot of videos with this hook. I will put some link in the video description if you are interested. So here we need to handle a pan gesture. So we need to provide the PanGestureHandler gesture event type. And with this specific hook, we can handle some different callbacks. So in this specific case, we just need to manage the onActive and the onEnd callback. So let's actually define the onActive and the onEnd. And we need to assign the PanGesture to the onGesture event. So inside each callback, we can access the event property. In this specific case, the event property will be a kind of a PanGesture event. So with this event property, we can access the event.translationX value. This value right here is the amount that we will scroll from the right to the left. So, of course, this value is useful, and we need to store it inside an object that is called shared value. So let's define a shared value. Let's define translateX with use shared value, and the initial value will be equal to 0. So a shared value is a value that can be shared between the JavaScript side and the native side. So this object will be used in order to share a value between the UI thread and the JavaScript thread. So we are storing the event when the PanGesture will be active. We will store the event.translationX inside the translateX.value. And in the end, we just need to provide an additional style and pass this style inside the animated view. So let's see in practice what I'm talking about. We just need to define the reanimated style. I'm using the hook useAnimatedStyle, and with a similar syntax to the syntax used for the style sheet, we can define the translateX value. So here we can pass the reanimated style inside our reanimated view. Let's see actually if everything is working. So we can see that the translateX is working almost fine. Of course, it isn't perfect. We just need to add some additional handling inside these callbacks. So basically what we are missing right now, of course, when we release the gesture, we don't want this kind of behavior. We want for now that the translateX value returns back to value 0. So let's see in practice. So we can see that the list item is returning back to value 0. In order to give to the item a kind of animation, we need to add the with_timing function. So we can use the with_timing or the with_spring function. These functions are functions provided from Reanimated. And let's see if everything is perfect. So we can see that everything is working nicely. So right now, let's actually focus to another component. We need actually to display a kind of icon, a trash icon right here when we are dismissing our list item. So let's actually provide this kind of component right now. So let's define first of all a container view. So a view with the styles.iconContainer, and let's define here the icon container style. So we need an height equal to the list item height, that is 70. So let's actually refactor a little bit this code. Let's define here the list item height equal to 70. So let's pass this value right here. And let's pass the height here. We will define also the list, the width equal to the height. And let's add a background color equal to red. So of course we don't want the icon right here. So let's use the position absolute. and let's add the right property equal to 10%. So for now we haven't centered perfectly this square right here, and that's caused by the margin vertical. So basically we are applying the margin vertical inside the task view, but we need to apply the margin vertical to the task container style. So let's move it right here. And we can see that everything is working nicely. So we need to provide here the icon. I will use the font awesome icon. So let's import font awesome 5 from xpod vector icons. And here let's use the font awesome 5 component. So we need to provide the name. The name of this specific icon will be trash alt. Of course, feel free to use whatever icon you want. We need to define a size equal to list item height, let's say the 40% of the list item height. And we need to provide a color. So I don't know why the suggestion are not working on is not working on Visual Studio Code, but here we need just to provide the last property, and it is the color. So of course, let's get rid about this background color red inside the icon container, and let's align the justify content, the icon with justify content and align items. So at this point, the icon is centered, and we just need to hide this icon under our list item. So right now, when we will scroll, we will see our icon under the list item. So at this point, we just need to handle the dismiss of the list item. So when we release the cell after a specific threshold, we want that the cell is completely complete actually the dismiss animation. So in order to handle that, let's define actually this threshold. So let's define the translate x threshold, and we will set this threshold equal to screen width multiplied by 0.3. So basically the threshold will be equal to the 30% of the screen width. Here, of course, we need to define the screen width, and we can use the dimensions API from React Native. So here, let's say width equal to screen width. And we can use this translate x threshold. So we need to handle this constant, and we can handle it inside the onEnd callback. So basically, we can see that the translate x value actually is a negative number. So let's actually print this value. So let's reload. So when we scroll, we can see that the translate x value is negative since we are scrolling from right to left. Therefore, the translate x threshold will be a negative value. And inside the onEnd callback, we can define the condition is, let's say, should be dismissed. If the translate, let's say, if the translate x value is less than translate x threshold. So if it should be dismissed, the translate x value should be equal to width timing minus screen width, since we want that the list item completes the animation. Otherwise, the translate x should be equal to value 0. So let's see that in practice. So when we release after the threshold, the list item is completely dismissed. So right now we want to handle also the animation on the icon. So we want that the icon at the beginning has an opacity of 0, and when we go after this kind of threshold, we want that the color of the opacity of the icon changes. So in order to do that, let's define the reanimated icon container style. Let's use the useAnimatedStyle hook. And let's handle here the opacity value. So for now, it will just be equal to 0. So we need to assign this reanimated icon style to this view. So of course, since we want to animate this view, we will need an animated view. So let's add this style right here. And we need to assign the reanimated icon container style. So let's reload. So for now, the opacity will always be equal to 0. What we want is that when the translateX value is less than translateX threshold, the opacity changes to value 1. Otherwise, it stays equal to value 0. So let's see that in practice. So we can see that everything is working almost fine. In order to animate it, we just need to add the with timing high order function. So let's use it. And we can see that right now everything is working smoothly. So there's still an issue. When we dismiss the list item, we need that the item height change to value 0. So we want to complete the dismiss animation. And in order to do that, we can convert this list item value to a shared value. So let's see that in practice, and let's define the item height shared value. So the initial value will be equal to list item height. So it will be equal to 70. So when the animation is completed, so if the item should be dismissed and we release the list item, we need to update the item height value. The item height value should be equal to value 0. So of course we need to assign this item height to a specific view, and we will assign this item height property inside the task container. So in order to do that, let's define as before the reanimated task container style. It will be equal to useAnimatedStyle as before. And we just need to return the height equal to item height value. So let's assign it here. Of course, we want to animate, therefore we need to use an animated view. So right now it is working, but we can see that there's still an issue, and the issue is caused by the margin vertical. So when we update the height changes to value 0, but the margin vertical stays equal to value 10. Therefore, we need to animate also this margin vertical property. So as before, let's remove it from here. Let's define a shared value. Margin vertical will be, we will use the use shared value. The initial value will be equal to 10. And when the animation will be completed, we need to update the margin vertical to value 0. And in the end, we just need to provide to the reanimated task container style the margin vertical property. So here it is. So we can see that the animation is almost working perfectly. So right now we can see that we have still an issue. Basically, this icon stays in the layout, and that's because the opacity isn't changing. So the opacity stays to value 1. So in order to keep things safe, we can change the opacity of the task container. So we can provide an additional shared value. So let's say opacity equal to use shared value. And the initial shared value, of course, will be equal to 1. And when the animation will be completed, as before, we just need to update this value to value 0. So we need to provide this opacity value inside the reanimated task container style. So right now, I think everything should work fine. And we can see that the animation is almost completed. So right now we have still an issue. Basically, we have completed the animation, but we are not changing the state property. We are just updating the UI. So basically, inside this task array, we will have the same tasks as before. We are just changing the layout. So if we want to update this task array, we need to provide a callback, the onDismiss callback to the list item component, and we need to handle this kind of callback. So first of all, let's actually add the onDismiss callback inside the list item props. So it will be an optional callback. It will have a task interface and it will return void. So let's handle the onDismiss property right here. And we need to fire this onDismiss callback when the item is complete, when the dismiss animation is completed. So we can handle actually the finish of the animation with the with timing function. So we can use any with timing function that we want. And inside the with timing function, we can specify the user config. For now, we just want to use the default user config, and we can access the callback. Inside the callback, we can access if the animation is completed, so if the animation is finished. So here, let's access this callback. And if the animation is finished and the onDismiss callback is provided, we can run the onDismiss function by specifying the task object. So here, of course, we need to provide the onDismiss callback. So let's define the onDismiss callback. So I'm using just the use callback hook from React. And let's write here the logic. So what we want is that when we dismiss a specific task, we want to filter this task from the task array. So here we want to filter the task with an index that is different from the task index that we are dismissing. So here we just need to provide this onDismiss function inside the list item props. And let's see what's going on. So here the issue is caused by the fact that we are using the onDismiss function, and the onDismiss function is running on the JavaScript on the JavaScript thread, and that's because we are updating a state value. So the problem is that the onEnd callback provided by the useAnimatedGestureHandler hook is a workless function. Therefore, the onEnd callback will run on the UI thread. So since we want that the onDismiss callback runs on the JavaScript thread, we need to specify it by running runOnJS function. So the runOnJS is a utility provided by React Native Reanimated. So here it is. And here we can pass and we can run a function on the JavaScript thread asynchronously from a worked function. So let's reload it. And we can see right now that everything is working smoothly. So we have our latest issue. So here it seems that the animation is completed, but we have a huge issue. When we try to scroll the list from the list item, we can see that the pan handler is conflicting with the ScrollView component. So, by the way, if we scroll from the space here between the list items, we can see that the scroll is working fine. So we need to fix it. We need to fix this kind of issue, and this requires a specific fix. So inside the PanGestureHandler, we can provide an additional property that is called simultaneous handlers. So here we need to let the pan and the scroll gesture working together. And in order to do that, we need to provide here the scroll reference. So we need to provide inside the simultaneous handler object a reference to the scroll view. So for now, let's just add this property here. So we need to add this simultaneous handler property. We can do it in a fancy way by using the TypeScript utility. So let's use pick PanGestureHandler props. And here, let's pick the simultaneous handler property. So basically, we are just adding inside the list item props this simultaneous handler property. So we can access the simultaneous handler here, and we can pass the simultaneous handler property inside the PanGestureHandler. So right now, of course, we need to provide here the simultaneous handler property. And we need to provide here a reference to the scroll view. So let's define a scroll ref with useRefHook from React. And let's assign this reference to the scroll view. So right now, we can see that the fix isn't completed, and that's because we are using a scroll view, but we are using the scroll view from React Native. So in order to fix this kind of issue, we just need to use the scroll view from React Native Gesture Handler. So I know that this kind of fix is a little bit complicated, but when we need to deal with a lot of gesture, it's much more useful to use the scroll view, the flat list, and the handlers from React Native Gesture Handler instead of the handlers of React Native. So let's reload. And right now we can see that the issue is completely fixed. So I hope that this tutorial was clear, and thanks a lot for staying with me all the time. And let me know in the section below if you have some suggestions for other videos about animation.